I'm Eleanor, 67, retired after teaching elementary school for 4 decades. My husband Robert passed away 3 years ago, leaving me to navigate retirement alone. My son William, now 42, has lived in one of our investment properties for years. We were once close, but everything changed after I retired and needed to discuss finances. I never expected my only child to look me in the eyes and say, "Shut up, I can't help you." What he didn't expect was my response. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I quietly sold the house from under him. Teaching was never just a job for me. For over 40 years, I poured my heart into educating young minds, arriving early to prepare my classroom, and staying late to grade papers. I loved watching children grow, their eyes lighting up when they finally understood a difficult concept. My classroom walls were always covered with colorful artwork and educational posters. I kept a jar of pencils on my desk for students who forgot theirs, and I often bought school supplies with my own money for children whose families couldn't afford them. I met Robert during my second year of teaching. He came to fix the heating system in my classroom one frigid January morning. He was kind, funny, and had the most beautiful blue eyes I'd ever seen. When he finished the repair, he asked if he could take me to dinner. By our third date, I knew he was special. We married 6 months later in a small ceremony with close friends and family. Robert worked as a maintenance supervisor for the school district, and we built a comfortable life together. We weren't wealthy, but we were careful with our money. We clipped coupons, packed lunches, and rarely ate at restaurants. Robert was handy around the house, fixing things himself rather than hiring professionals. I supplemented our income by tutoring students after school and during summer breaks. When I discovered I was pregnant with William, we were overjoyed. Robert painted the nursery pale yellow and built a beautiful wooden crib. William was a colicky baby who kept us up many nights, but the moment he smiled at us, all exhaustion vanished. He was our pride and joy, our only child. We read to him every night, took him to museums on weekends, and saved for his college education from the day he was born. As William grew, we realized we needed to plan for our future. Robert was incredibly forward-thinking when it came to finances. "We need to invest in something that will outlast our working years," he often said. We decided real estate was the safest bet and purchased our first rental property when William was 10. Over the next 20 years, we acquired 3 more modest houses, including the 3-bedroom ranch where William now lives. These properties were meant to provide income during our retirement. We maintained them meticulously, addressing issues promptly and keeping them updated. The tenants appreciated our responsiveness, and many stayed for years. We charged fair rent, enough to cover the mortgages and maintenance, with a small profit margin. Robert's diagnosis came without warning. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him 6 months, but my strong husband fought for 18. I took a leave of absence from teaching to care for him, administering medications, preparing special meals, and helping him to appointments. William visited occasionally, usually on Sundays for a few hours, but the bulk of caregiving fell to me. The day Robert died, a part of me went with him. After 38 years of marriage, I felt like half a person. The funeral was beautiful, with hundreds of people coming to pay their respects. William stood beside me, his arm around my shoulders as I received condolences. He helped arrange the service and stayed with me for a week afterward. I was grateful for his presence during those dark days. With Robert gone, I couldn't bear to return to the classroom. My heart wasn't in it anymore. I submitted my retirement papers 6 months after his passing, ending my teaching career at 64. I had my pension, Social Security, and the rental properties. On paper, I should have been financially secure. I had such wonderful plans for retirement. I would finally visit Europe, something Robert and I had always postponed. I would join a book club, take up gardening, and volunteer at the local animal shelter. Most importantly, I would spend more time with William and my grandchildren, Lily and Jacob, who were 7 and 5 at the time. William had divorced their mother, Amanda, 2 years before Robert's diagnosis. The split was amicable, with shared custody of the children. When William struggled to find affordable housing post-divorce, I suggested he move into one of our rental properties. The current tenants were moving out, and the timing seemed perfect. Robert agreed, and we decided to charge William below-market rent to help him get back on his feet. It was meant to be temporary. At first, William seemed appreciative. He moved in, settled the children into their new rooms, and invited me over for dinner once a week. He worked as a sales manager for a local car dealership, earning a decent salary plus commissions. He wasn't struggling financially as far as I could tell. He took vacations to Florida each year and bought a new car every 3 years like clockwork. About 6 months into my retirement, I noticed a shift in William's attitude. Our weekly dinners became bi-weekly, then monthly, then sporadic at best. When I called, he was often too busy to talk. When I visited, he seemed impatient for me to leave. The grandchildren still enjoyed seeing me, but William limited our time together. I tried not to take it personally. He was busy with work and parenting. But I couldn't help feeling increasingly isolated. Robert had been my best friend and confidant for nearly 4 decades. Without him, and with William's growing distance, loneliness became my constant companion. My health had always been relatively good, but shortly after retirement, I developed arthritis in my knees and hands. The pain made simple tasks like opening jars or climbing stairs difficult. My doctor prescribed medication that helped, but it was expensive even with Medicare. Then I needed dental work not covered by insurance, 2 crowns and a root canal that cost nearly $4,000. These unexpected medical expenses began depleting my savings faster than anticipated. I wasn't in dire straits, but I needed to be more careful with my finances than I had planned. The rental properties were supposed to provide a cushion, but 2 of my tenants moved out within months of each other, and it took longer than expected to find replacements. During those vacant months, I still had to pay the mortgages and utilities. One Sunday afternoon, I decided to bring up finances with William. We were sitting in his living room after lunch while the grandchildren played in the backyard. I mentioned that inflation was affecting my fixed income and asked if he might have any suggestions for additional income sources. "Mom, you have your pension and the rental properties. You should be fine," he said, barely looking up from his phone. "Yes, but medical expenses are adding up and the cost of everything keeps rising," I explained. "Maybe you should cut back on unnecessary spending," he suggested, still scrolling through his phone. "I already have," I said. "I haven't taken that trip to Europe I've been planning. I canceled my streaming subscriptions. I even started shopping at discount grocery stores." He sighed heavily. "I'm sure you'll figure it out. You always do." The conversation ended there, with no real resolution or support. It was the first of many similar exchanges that left me feeling dismissed and unimportant. A few weeks later, I drove by William's house and noticed the gutters overflowing during a rainstorm. The front lawn was overgrown and paint was peeling from the window frames. As his landlord, I was concerned about the property's condition. As his mother, I was disappointed by his lack of care for something we had worked so hard to provide. When I mentioned the maintenance issues, William became defensive. "I'm busy working to pay bills, Mom. I don't have time to play handyman." "Your father always made time to maintain our properties," I reminded him. "Well, I'm not Dad," he snapped. "And you're not exactly giving me incentive to invest in improvements when I'm basically just a long-term tenant." His words stung. We had given him significantly reduced rent for years, yet he acted entitled rather than grateful. Still, I didn't want to create conflict, so I offered to help in other ways. "I could watch Lily and Jacob more often if that would help you manage your time better," I suggested. Maybe after school a few days a week? That would give you time to take care of the house. They're fine at the after-school program, he said. Besides, at your age, I'm not sure you could keep up with them. At my age? I was only 65, not 95. I had been an elementary school teacher my entire career. I knew how to manage children's energy. His dismissal hurt more than he realized. As months passed, William's availability for family time diminished further. He always had excuses, work commitments, the children's activities, home repairs, though I saw little evidence of those. Or simply being too tired. Meanwhile, I found myself increasingly alone. The silence in my house became oppressive. To combat loneliness, I joined a senior center near my home. I attended yoga classes modified for arthritis and participated in a book club. I volunteered at the local library, reading to children during story hour. These activities helped fill my days, but evenings and weekends remained painfully quiet. One day, while reviewing my financial records, I realized William had been paying the same rent for nearly 5 years, despite rising property taxes and insurance premiums. The arrangement that was meant to be temporary had become permanent, and it was affecting my retirement security. After careful consideration, I decided to discuss a modest rent increase with him. I chose a Sunday when the grandchildren were with their mother, hoping for William's full attention. I prepared his favorite meal, pot roast with roasted potatoes, and brought a homemade apple pie for dessert. After dinner, as we sat with coffee, I broached the subject. William, I need to discuss something important with you. I began. You've been paying the same rent since you moved in 5 years ago. He immediately tensed. Are you seriously going to raise my rent, Mom? After everything I've been through with the divorce? It's been 5 years since your divorce, I reminded him gently. And property taxes have increased by 30% in that time. Insurance costs more every year too. So I'm supposed to subsidize your retirement? He asked sharply. I have kids to support. I'm not asking for market rate, I assured him. Just enough to cover the increased expenses. You'd still be paying well below what other tenants would pay. This is unbelievable, he muttered. My own mother, nickel and diming me. That's not fair, William. I've helped you save thousands of dollars over the years. And I'm supposed to be grateful forever, he asked. Maybe Dad left you enough money that you don't actually need the rental income. Have you thought of that? His words shocked me into silence. Robert had left everything to me. But enough was relative. Enough for what? For basic living expenses, yes. For unexpected medical costs and rising inflation? Not necessarily. Besides, the rental properties had been our joint investment in our future. My future. After that conversation, William became even more distant. My calls went to voicemail. Invitations to dinner were declined. Even visits with my grandchildren became less frequent. Each rejection felt like a small heartbreak. The son I had raised, the child I had poured my heart and soul into, was treating me like an inconvenience rather than a beloved parent. The winter that year was particularly harsh. Temperatures dropped below freezing for weeks, and snow piled up along driveways and sidewalks. One frigid morning in January, I woke to a silent house and a bone-chilling cold that penetrated my blankets. When I checked the thermostat, it read 52 degrees despite being set at 68. The furnace had stopped working. I called the HVAC company that had serviced our heating system for years. They couldn't send anyone until the following day due to high demand during the cold snap. I put on extra layers, turned on the oven, and boiled water on the stove to generate heat. Still shivering, I called William, hoping he might offer a temporary place to stay or at least check on me. The call went to voicemail. I left a message explaining the situation and asking if he could call me back. Hours passed without a response. I called again around noon. Again, voicemail. By evening, with no word from William and the house growing colder, I called my neighbor Martha, who immediately invited me to stay with her until the furnace was repaired. The HVAC technician arrived the next afternoon. The diagnosis was grim. The heat exchanger had cracked, a potentially dangerous situation that required replacing the entire furnace. The cost? Nearly $6,000. Even with the emergency fund I had set aside, this expense would significantly impact my financial security. While signing the paperwork for the new furnace installation, I received a text from William. "Sorry, busy weekend." "Everything okay?" No phone call, no offer of help, just a perfunctory text sent nearly 36 hours after my first call. I replied simply, "Furnace broke. Being replaced tomorrow. Staying with Martha." His response came quickly this time. "That's good. Let me know if you need anything." But he didn't mean it. If he had, he would have called, would have checked on his mother during a frigid January night without heat. His message was an empty courtesy, nothing more. The furnace replacement depleted my emergency fund. Watching my savings dwindle, I realized I needed to reassess my financial situation. I spent a week gathering all my financial documents, reviewing expenses and income, and calculating how long my resources would last if current trends continued. The results were concerning. Between increasing medical expenses, rising costs of living, and the below-market rent William paid, my financial cushion was shrinking faster than anticipated. At this rate, I might face serious financial difficulties in my late 70s or early 80s, precisely when I might need assisted living or increased medical care. After careful consideration, I decided to have another conversation with William about the rental property. This time, I would come prepared with facts and figures. I would present two options, either an increase to market rate rent or selling the property to reinvest the proceeds. Both options would strengthen my financial position without causing William unreasonable hardship. I called William and asked for a meeting to discuss something important. He sounded annoyed, but agreed to meet for coffee the following Saturday afternoon. I spent days preparing for the conversation, rehearsing what I would say, anticipating his objections, and reminding myself that this was about financial security, not emotion. Saturday arrived, and I waited at the coffee shop for 20 minutes before William finally appeared, looking irritated and checking his watch repeatedly. "I can only stay for half an hour," he announced as he sat down. "I promised Lily I'd take her shopping for new soccer cleats." "I'll be brief," I assured him, though his attitude hurt. "I've been reviewing my finances, and I need to make some changes regarding the rental property." "Changes? What kind of changes?" His tone was immediately defensive. I took a deep breath and presented the situation as calmly as I could. I explained about the furnace replacement, the increasing medical costs, and the projections for my long-term financial health. I showed him a spreadsheet comparing his current rent to market rates for similar properties in the area. "So I have two proposals," I concluded. "Either we adjust your rent to match current market rates, or I sell the property and reinvest the proceeds to generate better returns for my retirement." William's face reddened as I spoke. When I finished, he leaned forward, his voice low but intense. "Are you serious right now? You want to either jack up my rent or kick me out of my home?" "Your own son." "It's not about wanting to," I tried to explain. "It's about needing financial security for my future." "Your future?" he scoffed. "You're retired, living in a paid-off house, with rental income and a pension. What more do you need?" "William, healthcare costs alone could easily—" "Shut up, I can't help you," he interrupted, his voice rising enough that people at nearby tables glanced our way. "I have my own problems. I have kids to raise, a mortgage to pay on my ex-wife's house, car payments, insurance. You've been a burden since you retired, always complaining about money when you should be enjoying your golden years instead of pinching pennies." I sat frozen, his words cutting deeper than any physical pain I'd ever experienced. A burden? After everything I had sacrificed as a mother, after the below-market rent, after the childcare, after the emotional support through his divorce. I was a burden? "I see," I finally managed, my voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry to have burdened you all these years. I gathered my papers with trembling hands and stood up. William didn't try to stop me or apologize. He just watched me walk away, still frowning, as if I was the one who had behaved inappropriately. The drive home was a blur through tears. I kept hearing his words over and over. Shut up, I can't help you. My own child. The baby I had nursed, the boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, the teenager whose college applications I had proofread. The man whose divorce I had helped him through, he couldn't be bothered to help me when I needed him. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car, unable to move as waves of grief washed over me. It wasn't just about the money. It was about respect, about reciprocal care, about family supporting each other. Somewhere along the way, William had forgotten these values. Or perhaps he had never truly embraced them. That night, alone in my too-quiet house, I realized something had to change. Not just for my financial security, but for my dignity, for my self-respect. I could not, would not, remain in a relationship where I was considered a burden, even if that relationship was with my only child. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in Robert's old armchair, surrounded by photo albums documenting William's life from infancy to adulthood. Here he was, a toothless 6-year-old grinning after losing his first tooth. Here, a gangly teenager receiving his driver's license. Here, a proud young man in his college graduation gown, with Robert and me beaming beside him. Where had we gone wrong? Had we spoiled him? Had we failed to teach him the importance of reciprocity, of caring for those who care for you? Or was this simply who William had chosen to become, someone who saw his aging mother as a burden rather than a person deserving of dignity and respect? As dawn broke, I made a decision. I would not confront William again. I would not beg for his respect or financial consideration. Instead, I would take action to secure my future, with or without his understanding. My first step was consulting with a financial advisor. Sarah Miller had been recommended by a fellow teacher who had retired a few years before me. I scheduled an appointment for the following week, gathering all my financial documents in preparation. Sarah's office was warm and inviting, with certificates on the wall and family photos on her desk. She reviewed my situation carefully, asking thoughtful questions about my income, expenses, assets, and goals. Based on your current financial trajectory, you're right to be concerned, she said after analyzing my documents. With increasing medical expenses and below-market rental income, you could face significant challenges in your later years. What do you recommend? I asked. The property your son occupies represents an underperforming asset, she explained. If you sold it in today's market, you could reinvest the proceeds in a more diversified portfolio that would likely generate better returns with less management responsibility. She showed me projections comparing my current situation with various alternatives. The difference was striking. Selling the property and reinvesting could potentially add 5 to 7 years of financial security to my retirement. My next step was consulting with a real estate attorney to understand my legal rights and responsibilities. Michael Chin had handled the closing when we purchased our last rental property, and I trusted his expertise. Since your son doesn't have a formal lease, he's essentially a month-to-month tenant, Michael explained. Legally, you're required to provide 30 days' notice of any change, whether that's a rent increase or termination due to sale. And if I decide to sell, what are my obligations to him as a tenant? I asked. The new owners would assume the landlord role. They could continue renting to him, potentially at a higher rate, or provide notice to vacate if they prefer to occupy the property themselves or renovate it. Michael also explained that the property had appreciated significantly since we purchased it 15 years ago. Based on recent comparable sales in the neighborhood, he estimated it could sell for nearly twice what we had paid. Armed with this information, I researched rental prices in the area. I discovered that comparable 3-bedroom houses were renting for almost double what William was paying. No wonder he was resistant to change. He was receiving an enormous discount that would be impossible to find elsewhere. Rather than confronting William again, I decided to take action. I contacted Jessica Barnes, a real estate agent recommended by my neighbor Martha. Jessica had specialized in my neighborhood for over a decade and had a reputation for quick, profitable sales. We met at my home to discuss the property and my goals. Jessica was professional and empathetic when I explained the situation with my son. "This isn't uncommon," she assured me. "Family dynamics often complicate real estate decisions. We can handle this discreetly until legal notice is required." Jessica visited the property while William was at work, taking exterior photos and noting its features. Based on its location, size, and the current market, she recommended listing it slightly above what Michael had estimated. Her confidence gave me hope that this difficult decision would at least yield positive financial results. "What about showing the interior?" I asked, concerned about William's reaction. "We can schedule showings when your son is typically away," Jessica suggested. "We'll provide the legally required notice, of course. We can also highlight that the property comes with a tenant who might wish to stay, which could appeal to investors looking for immediate rental income." As Jessica left with her notes and photos, I felt a mixture of emotions: relief at taking action, guilt about potentially disrupting William's life, and uncertainty about whether I was doing the right thing. That evening, I found myself second-guessing my decision. Was I being vindictive? Was I punishing William for his hurtful words rather than making a sound financial decision? I sat in Robert's chair again, wishing I could ask his advice, feel his reassuring hand on my shoulder, as if answering my unspoken questions. I remembered a box of Robert's personal papers I had stored in the closet after his death. I hadn't been ready to go through them then, but now I felt drawn to them, hoping to find something, anything, that might guide me. Among tax documents and insurance policies, I found a letter Robert had written to me but never given. It was dated 2 months before his diagnosis, sealed in an envelope with "For Eleanor" written in his neat handwriting. With trembling fingers, I opened it. "My dearest Eleanor," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm probably gone. There are things I want to make sure you know." The letter continued with Robert's thoughts on our life together, his pride in our accomplishments, and his deep love for me. But one paragraph stood out. "The rental properties are your security, Eleanor. We bought them together for our future. Your future if I'm gone. Don't let sentiment override good sense when it comes to these investments. They're not family heirlooms. They're financial tools to ensure you never struggle. Make the decisions that protect your dignity and independence, even if they're difficult." Tears streamed down my face as I read his words. It was as if Robert knew exactly what I would face, what guidance I would need. His message was clear. I wasn't wrong to prioritize my financial security. The properties were investments, not gifts, and I had every right to manage them accordingly. With renewed resolve, I called Jessica the next morning and confirmed my decision to list the property. She moved quickly, creating a listing with the exterior photos and a detailed description highlighting the home's features and investment potential. To keep my finances separate from this transaction, I opened a new bank account at a different bank than the one William and I used. This would be where the proceeds from the sale would go, ensuring clean accounting and preventing any confusion about the funds. Jessica scheduled the first showings for the following weekend, when William typically took the children to their soccer games. I provided the legally required written notice of entry, keeping the language professional and avoiding any mention of a potential sale. The notice simply stated that the landlord would be conducting routine inspections and maintenance checks. As the showing date approached, I felt increasingly nervous. I wasn't sure how William would react to strangers viewing the house, even if he wasn't present. Would he guess my intentions? Would he confront me again? Despite my anxiety, I remained committed to my decision. Robert's letter had reinforced what I already knew. This was about securing my future, not punishing my son. The first weekend of showings exceeded Jessica's expectations. 6 potential buyers toured the property, and by Sunday evening, we had received 3 offers. 2 were at the asking price, and 1 was slightly above. Jessica called with the news, her voice excited. "This is even better than I anticipated, Eleanor. The market is clearly hungry for properties in this neighborhood." I chose the highest offer, which came from a couple purchasing the house as an investment property. Their offer was clean, with minimal contingencies and a quick closing timeline. They also expressed interest in keeping the current tenant if he wished to stay at market rate rent. "They're planning to increase the rent to current market rates, of course," Jessica explained. "But they see value in maintaining continuity if your son is interested." A mixture of satisfaction and guilt washed over me as I signed the acceptance documents. Was I doing the right thing? The doubt crept in again, but I reminded myself of Robert's words. This was about financial security, not emotion. The guilt faded, replaced by a sense of taking control of my future. The sale proceeded quickly. The inspection revealed only minor issues that I agreed to address. The appraisal came in slightly above the sale price, confirming we had priced the property appropriately. Within 3 weeks, we were ready to close. I had still not told William about the sale. Legally, I was only required to provide notice once the sale was final. Part of me wanted to warn him, to prepare him for the change, but I remembered his words at the coffee shop. "Shut up, I can't help you." He had made his position clear. Now I was making mine clear through actions rather than words. The day after closing, the new owners sent the legally required notice to William, informing him of the change in ownership and the upcoming adjustment to market rate rent. The letter included my name as the former owner and seller of the property. I was in my garden when my phone rang. William's name flashed on the screen. Taking a deep breath, I answered. "How could you do this?" he demanded without preamble, his voice shaking with anger. "How could you sell the house without even telling me?" "I tried to discuss the property with you," I replied, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "You told me to shut up. That you couldn't help me. You called me a burden. So this is revenge? Selling the house out from under me?" "No, William. This is financial planning. The property was underperforming as an investment. I needed to reallocate those assets for my retirement security. You could have given me a chance to buy it," he shouted. "Would you have paid market value?" I asked. His silence was answer enough. "The new owners are willing to continue renting to you," I continued. "They've simply adjusted the rent to reflect current market rates. It's almost double what I'm paying now. How am I supposed to afford that?" "The same way other tenants in the neighborhood do," I said. "The discount you've been receiving for years was generous, but it wasn't sustainable for my financial health." "I'll have to move," he threatened. "I'll find somewhere else to live, and you'll never see the grandkids again." His attempt to manipulate me with the grandchildren hurt deeply, but I refused to be blackmailed emotionally. "That would be your choice, William. I hope you wouldn't use the children that way. But I can't make decisions about my financial security based on threats." He hung up without another word. I sat on my garden bench, phone in hand, tears streaming down my face. Despite the righteousness of my decision, the rift with my only child felt like an open wound. Over the next few days, William called several times, his approach oscillating between anger and pleading. In one call, he accused me of betrayal and heartlessness. In the next, he begged me to speak with the new owners on his behalf, to convince them to offer him a special rate. "I can't interfere with their business decisions," I explained. "The property is theirs now, but they'll listen to you. Tell them I'm your son, that I've been living here for years. They know that, William. They're still willing to rent to you, just at the current market rate." As the reality of his situation sank in, William began desperately searching for comparable housing in the area. He called me one evening, his voice deflated. "Do you have any idea how expensive rentals are these days? I can't find anything with 3 bedrooms for less than what the new owners are asking." "I know," I said quietly. That's why the property sold so quickly. Rental rates have increased significantly in recent years. So, what am I supposed to do? Move the kids to a worse school district? Make them share a bedroom? Those are decisions every parent has to make based on their budget, I replied. I made similar choices when you were growing up. William fell silent, perhaps truly understanding for the first time the sacrifices Robert and I had made as parents, the careful financial planning that had allowed us to provide for him while securing our own future. One afternoon, he appeared at my door unannounced. His expression was a mixture of anger and desperation as he stood on my porch. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside, allowing him into the home where he had grown up. We sat in the living room, the tension palpable between us. "I still can't believe you did this," he began. "After everything, after Dad dying. After my divorce, after all I've been through. My own mother sold my home." "It wasn't your home, William," I corrected gently. "It was an investment property that you rented at a significant discount. There's a difference. So business trumps family for you now." "No. But my financial security matters too. When you told me to shut up, that you couldn't help me, that I was a burden, you made it clear that I couldn't count on family support in my old age. So I had to take steps to ensure I could take care of myself." William looked away, perhaps finally recognizing the impact of his words. We sat in silence for several minutes before he spoke again. "I can't afford to move," he admitted finally. "Not without uprooting the kids from their school and activities. I've looked everywhere." "Then you'll need to adjust your budget to accommodate the increased rent," I suggested. "I've already spoken to the new owners," he said. "They've agreed to phase in the increase over 6 months rather than all at once. It's still going to be tight. You might consider taking on additional sales shifts," I offered. "Or reducing other expenses temporarily." He nodded reluctantly, then stood to leave. At the door, he turned back. "I'm still angry about this," he said. "But I said things I shouldn't have. I didn't mean you were a burden." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was something. A small acknowledgement that his words had been hurtful, that perhaps he understood a little better now. "I hope we can work through this," I said. "For both our sakes, and for Lily and Jacob." He nodded again and left. I watched him drive away, hoping this difficult lesson might eventually lead to healing rather than permanent estrangement. Over the next several weeks, William immersed himself in house hunting, determined to find an alternative to paying the increased rent. He called me occasionally to complain about the outrageous prices, the competitive rental market, and the substandard properties within his budget. "Everything affordable is either tiny or in terrible condition," he lamented during one call. "And anything comparable to what I have now costs even more than what the new owners are asking." I listened sympathetically but offered no solutions. This was a reality check William needed to experience for himself, the recognition that he had been receiving an extraordinary benefit at my expense for years. Meanwhile, I had deposited the proceeds from the house sale into my new account and met with Sarah, my financial advisor, to develop an investment strategy. She helped me create a diversified portfolio designed to generate both growth and income, with a focus on dividend-paying stocks and bonds. "This allocation should provide more monthly income than the rental property did," Sarah explained, showing me the projections. "And with far less management responsibility for you." For the first time in years, I felt financially secure. I scheduled the dental work I had been postponing and enrolled in a water aerobics class recommended by my doctor for my arthritis. I even booked a 2-week tour of Italy for the following spring, the European trip Robert and I had always planned but never taken. William, meanwhile, had decided to remain in the house and pay the increased rent. He had spoken with the new owners and negotiated a 6-month gradual increase rather than an immediate jump to market rate. This gave him time to adjust his budget accordingly. Our relationship, however, remained strained. When I called to check on the grandchildren, his responses were curt. When I suggested having Lily and Jacob for a weekend, he claimed they were too busy with activities. The warm family relationship I had hoped to nurture in retirement seemed increasingly unlikely. One morning, I received a text from Amanda, William's ex-wife. "Is everything okay between you and William? The kids miss you and don't understand why they haven't seen you lately." I called her back, hesitant to involve her in the conflict, but concerned about maintaining my relationship with my grandchildren. Amanda had always been kind and respectful toward me, even after the divorce. "William and I had a disagreement about the rental property," I explained, keeping the details vague. "He's upset that I sold it." "Oh," she said, understanding immediately. "That explains his mood lately. He mentioned having to tighten the belt financially but didn't say why." "I'm worried about losing connection with Lily and Jacob," I admitted. "That won't happen," Amanda assured me. "They're with me half the time, and you're always welcome to see them during my custody days. In fact, why don't you take them this Saturday? I could use a break, and they've been asking about you." I gratefully accepted her offer. That Saturday, I took Lily and Jacob to the Science Museum, followed by ice cream at their favorite shop. They chattered excitedly about school and friends, seemingly unaware of the tension between their father and me. When I brought them back to Amanda's house, they hugged me tightly and extracted a promise that we would do it again soon. As the weeks passed, I established a routine of seeing the grandchildren during Amanda's custody time. William made no comment about these visits, apparently content to maintain the wall of silence between us as long as I didn't interfere with his parenting time. The first payment to the new owners seemed to hit William hard. He called me afterward, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Do you have any idea what this does to my monthly budget? I had to cancel our summer vacation plans. The kids are devastated." I felt a pang of guilt, but reminded myself that William's financial choices were his own. He earned a good salary and received child support from Amanda. The increased rent was significant, but not insurmountable for someone with his income. "I'm sorry the children are disappointed," I said. "Perhaps you could plan some local activities instead? The community pool has reasonable summer passes." "That's not the point," he snapped. "The point is that your decision has consequences for innocent children." "So did your decision to dismiss my financial concerns?" I reminded him gently. "Every choice we make affects others." "William." He hung up without responding, leaving me with a familiar mixture of sadness and resolve. I would not be manipulated by guilt, but I also wouldn't give up on eventually rebuilding our relationship. 3 months after the sale, I experienced a frightening health scare. Severe abdominal pain sent me to the emergency room, where doctors discovered gallstones requiring immediate surgery. The procedure itself was routine, but the recovery would require assistance for the first few days. From my hospital bed, I called William, hoping he might set aside his resentment during this crisis. "I'm having gallbladder surgery tomorrow," I explained when he answered. "The doctor says I'll need someone to drive me home and stay with me for at least the first night. I wondered if you might be able to help." "Tomorrow?" he asked. "I have an important sales meeting I can't reschedule, and the kids have soccer practice after school." "I understand," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. "I'll figure something out." "Can't the hospital keep you an extra night if you need help? Insurance won't cover an extended stay for this procedure. It's considered outpatient." "Well, I'm sure one of your friends can help," he said. "You've always been so independent." After we hung up, I lay in the hospital bed, tears sliding silently down my cheeks. Not because I lacked alternatives. Martha had already offered to help, and several friends from the senior center would gladly assist, but because my only child couldn't be bothered to rearrange his schedule when I truly needed him. Martha drove me home from the hospital and stayed for 3 days, sleeping in my guest room and ensuring I had meals, medication, and company during my recovery. Friends from the senior center organized a meal train, bringing homemade soups and casseroles throughout the following week. The kindness of these friends, some of whom I had known for less than a year, stood in stark contrast to my son's absence. William called once during my recovery. A brief conversation to ask how I was feeling. When I mentioned the support I had received from friends, he seemed surprised. "I didn't realize you had such a network," he commented. "I've been building connections since retirement," I explained. "The senior center has become like a second family to me." "That's good," he said, sounding almost disappointed that I had managed without him. As I recovered, I reflected on how our relationship had evolved. William had grown accustomed to receiving support without reciprocating. He expected accommodation of his needs while dismissing mine. This imbalance had persisted because I had allowed it, perhaps out of maternal instinct or fear of conflict. But my surgery and recovery had clarified something important. I wasn't alone. I had built meaningful connections with people who valued me, who showed up when needed without keeping score. These relationships were more authentic than the one-sided dynamic William and I had developed. By the time I was fully recovered, I had made peace with the possibility that William and I might never regain the closeness we once had. I would continue to love him, to maintain a relationship with my grandchildren, and to leave the door open for reconciliation. But I would no longer define my happiness or self-worth by his approval or attention. 6 months after the property sale, William made an unexpected visit on a Sunday afternoon. He looked uncomfortable as he stood on my porch, hands in his pockets. "I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with us tonight," he said. "The kids have been asking about you." I was surprised but pleased by the invitation. "I'd love to," I replied. "Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself," he said with a small, awkward smile. That evening, I drove to the house that was no longer mine but still contained so many memories. Lily and Jacob rushed to greet me with enthusiastic hugs, then dragged me to see their latest art projects and school achievements. William moved around the kitchen, preparing a simple meal of spaghetti and salad. As we ate, the conversation remained centered on the children and their activities. William was polite but reserved, carefully avoiding any mention of the property sale or the rent he now paid to new owners. I followed his lead, grateful for even this tentative peace. After dinner, while the children watched a movie in the living room, William and I sat at the kitchen table with coffee. "I've been doing some thinking," he said finally, staring into his cup rather than meeting my eyes. "About what happened, about the things I said." I waited, allowing him the space to continue at his own pace. "It wasn't fair to call you a burden," he admitted. "You've never been that. And I shouldn't have dismissed your concerns about retirement finances. I guess I just didn't want to think about you getting older, about you needing help someday. We all get older, William," I said gently. "Planning for that reality isn't pessimistic, it's prudent." He nodded. "The new owners are actually decent landlords. They've been responsive about repairs. More so than I probably deserved given how I neglected the place." This was the closest he had come to acknowledging his own role in the situation. I accepted it as progress. "I'm glad to hear that," I said. "How are you managing with the increased rent?" "It's been an adjustment," he admitted. "I've had to cut back on some things. Take on some additional shifts at the dealership. But we're making it work." The evening ended with tentative plans for a family dinner the following weekend. As I drove home, I felt cautiously optimistic. The wall between us hadn't come down entirely, but perhaps a small window had opened, a possibility for rebuilding on more equal, respectful terms. 6 months later, the change in my life was remarkable. The proceeds from the house sale, professionally invested and managed, had indeed provided better returns than the below-market rent. My financial advisor, Sarah, had helped me create a sustainable withdrawal plan that covered my expenses while allowing the principal to continue growing. With my financial concerns addressed, I had finally taken that trip to Italy I had dreamed about for decades. For 2 glorious weeks, I wandered through Rome, Florence, and Venice, marveling at ancient architecture, world-famous art, and scenery that took my breath away. I sent postcards to Lily and Jacob from each city, sharing little historical facts and stories I thought might interest them. Back home, I had expanded my social circle through the senior center and volunteer work. I joined a hiking group that took gentle walks through local parks, enjoying nature and conversation. I volunteered as a reading tutor at my old elementary school, helping struggling students discover the joy of books. These activities filled my days with purpose and connection. My relationship with William had slowly begun to heal. Our weekly family dinners had become a regular tradition, sometimes at his house, sometimes at mine. He was still reserved at times, occasionally making passive-aggressive comments about finances, but these instances became less frequent as months passed. One unexpected development was William's increasing willingness to help with tasks around my house. Without being asked, he had cleaned my gutters before winter, repaired a leaking faucet, and even mowed my lawn when he noticed it getting long. These silent acts of service seemed to be his way of rebuilding our relationship on new terms. One Sunday afternoon, as William was replacing the batteries in my smoke detectors, another task he had volunteered for, he paused on the stepladder and looked down at me. "You know, I've been thinking about what happened with the house," he said, surprising me with the direct reference to our conflict. "I was angry for a long time, but I understand now why you did it." "You do?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. "Yeah. Dad always taught me that you have to protect yourself financially, that no one else will do it for you. I guess I just never thought that applied to family relationships too." "Family support is wonderful when it's freely given," I said carefully, "but it can't be assumed or demanded." He nodded, returning to the smoke detector. "I've learned a lot these past months about budgeting, about priorities. Having to pay full rent has forced me to be more careful with money, more thoughtful about spending." "Those are valuable lessons," I acknowledged. "The kids have actually benefited too," he continued, climbing down the ladder. "We do more free activities now, hiking, picnics, game nights. They seem to enjoy that more than the expensive stuff anyway." This conversation marked a turning point in our healing process. William had moved beyond resentment to reflection and growth. He was beginning to see the situation not just as a loss, but as an opportunity for learning. In my own reflection, I recognized how I had enabled William's entitlement over the years. By charging him significantly below market rent without a timeline or expectations, I had inadvertently fostered his belief that parental support was an unlimited right rather than a temporary assistance. By avoiding difficult financial conversations until crisis forced my hand, I had contributed to the explosive nature of our conflict. These insights didn't excuse William's hurtful words or dismissive attitude, but they helped me understand my own role in our relationship dynamics. Moving forward, I was committed to maintaining healthy boundaries while rebuilding our connection. The new balance in our relationship extended to my grandchildren as well. I continued seeing Lily and Jacob during Amanda's custody time, but now William also actively encouraged visits during his parenting days. He seemed to recognize the value of their relationship with me, perhaps prompted by my health scare and the realization that our time together wasn't unlimited. One evening, after the children were in bed, William and I sat on his back porch with glasses of iced tea. The summer air was warm, fireflies blinking in the gathering darkness. "Mom," he said hesitantly, "I never properly apologized for what I said that day at the coffee shop. About you being a burden, about telling you to shut up. It was inexcusable." "Thank you for saying that," I replied, genuinely touched by his acknowledgement. "When you had your surgery and I couldn't, or didn't, make time to help, I felt ashamed afterward. Dad would have been so disappointed in me." "We all make mistakes, William. What matters is learning from them." "I'm trying," he said simply. And he was. Over the following months, William demonstrated his changing attitude in numerous ways. He began calling regularly just to check in. He invited me to Lily's school play and Jacob's baseball games without prompting. He even offered to accompany me to a medical appointment when I mentioned being nervous about the results. For my part, I maintained clear boundaries about financial discussions. When William occasionally hinted about helping with his expenses, I gently redirected the conversation. I was willing to offer emergency assistance if truly needed, but regular subsidies were a thing of the past. The lesson I had learned, and that I hoped William was learning too, was that true family support must be reciprocal and respectful. Financial assistance without expectation of reciprocity might seem generous, but it can actually undermine the development of responsibility and mutual respect between adult family members. Perhaps most surprising was how my relationship with William actually improved after I stopped accommodating his financial expectations. By standing firm and requiring respect for my own needs, I had ultimately fostered a healthier, more balanced connection. It was counterintuitive but true. Sometimes love requires boundaries rather than boundless giving. As I approach my 70th birthday, I look back on the difficult decision to sell the rental property with peace rather than regret. That decision was a turning point. Not just financially, but relationally. It forced both William and me to confront unhealthy patterns and begin building something more authentic. For any retirees watching who might be facing similar situations with adult children, I want to share this wisdom. Your financial security is not selfish, it's necessary. Setting boundaries is not unloving, it's healthy. And sometimes, the most caring thing you can do for an entitled adult child is to stop enabling behaviors that prevent their growth. William still pays rent, now to different landlords, but he has gained something more valuable than subsidized housing. He has gained self-reliance, responsibility, and a more mature relationship with his mother. And I have gained financial security, self-respect, and the quiet confidence that comes from standing up for your own worth. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that seemed harsh in the moment but led to positive change? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories and lessons learned in the later chapters of life. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's never too late to establish healthy boundaries and create the retirement you deserve.